Today, we're going to be covering a very exciting topic, and that really is the concept of being able to actually use, interact, and direct agents in sort of a more local way. And for that, we're going to be taking a look at Magentic-One, which is a Microsoft release, and we can see here it is on GitHub. Now, really the best way to demonstrate this and explain how it is, how it works and what it is to start by reading right here. We're introducing Magentic-One, our new generalist multi-agent system for solving open-ended web and file-based tasks across a variety of domains. Magentic-One represents a significant step towards developing agents that can complete tasks that people encounter in their work and personal lives. So, to kind of give a bit of visual reinforcement to what we just read, I'm simply going to go here and demonstrate this to you. Now, I do have this all set up in my Ubuntu 2022.4 system, and the latter half of this video will be just a quick snippet on how I actually went about installing this and getting everything to work, as I had seen a few people having a bit of trouble with this. So I am running one of the example scripts here, which we will obviously see more about later. And as we see here, there is a user input line and just prompting me to actually give some instructions for these agents to juggle around and play with. Now, I want to do something very simple, but something that will kind of give us a good demonstration of the agents working together. I have asked these agents to browse the web, find a random subreddit, and tell me the most upvoted post on that subreddit. Now, we're going to see a large amount of text start to appear in the terminal here, and while I'm not going to read through it all kind of line by line, what I am going to do is just kind of try to give a general idea of what's going on. So the first thing we see here is the initial plan. And now, before I go any further, I do want to make note that the backend of this right now is using the OpenAI API, so meaning an API key from OpenAI, not a ChatGPT login or anything, and it is using the 4.0 model. However, being that this is actually open source, that means that we can sort of dive behind the curtain under the hood and work to perhaps mold this to work with a locally run AI setup, which there have been reports of folks being able to do, and is something that I will personally be looking into doing as well. So I will make a video of that when the time comes. Now we can head on back to this, and we see that it has shown our prompt, and the orchestrator has given us an initial plan. We're working to address the following user request, which my request, of course. To answer this request, we have assembled the following team. So here we're going to meet our agents. The web surfer, a helpful assistant with access to a web browser. Ask them to perform web searches, open pages, and interact with content, which those of us who are perhaps inclined to that domain may be thinking of some more entertaining use cases for this, but it can also summarize the entire page or answer questions based on content. We have a coder, a helpful and general purpose AI assistant that has strong language skills, Python skills, and Linux command line skills. An executor, which is an agent for executing code, and a file surfer, an agent that can handle local files. Here's an initial fact sheet to consider. There are no specific facts or figures given in the request itself. True. Determine which subreddit is selected randomly from the platform. Identify the most upvoted post. Correct. Derive what qualifies as the most upvoted post. And it's kind of just telling itself what an upvoted post would essentially mean. And here's a plan to follow. I don't have browsing capabilities. So we can see that it's almost kind of saying I can't do that right now, but then here we go. So we have a ledger of tasks and whether they've been completed or not. So have we accessed Reddit to find a subreddit and identify its most upvoted post? Has not been accomplished. No evidence of being in a loop as the task has not been time. This is the beginning. Stages is no substantial. Web surfer should be the next. Web surfer is best suited to initiate browsing for a random subreddit. So the orchestrator is telling the web surfer, please browse to Reddit to find a random subreddit and determine the most upvoted post from that subreddit. Now I'm going to go through this a little faster as I don't want to take too long. So I typed random subreddit. Here's a screenshot of a random subreddit. So it searches Bing, being that this is a Microsoft release, obviously that would be the default search engine used with this. And we can see some metadata extracted from the web page, and then it will take a look at the screenshot that was taken, being that it is best, or I believe necessary, to have a multimodal AI model to allow the screenshots to actually be parsed. So we're just going to scroll down, and we see a little bit of information being parsed here from looking at the screenshot. And then we go back down, and we have our orchestrator thinking. So the instruction or question is proceed with finding a random subreddit using the available tools. Click on the random subreddit generator perchance link to access a random subreddit. So once again, the orchestrator is telling the web surfer, click on the random subreddit generator perchance, which I would assume is a third-party website because I am not actually seeing what is going on here. There is actually some flags and stuff to allow that to happen, which will be quickly gone over in the latter half of this video. So you can see the web surfer, yep, is doing it. I clicked it. Here's a screenshot. So I'm falling to another subreddit, r/brutalism. Okay, so this, I believe, is an architectural subreddit. So we have found a random subreddit, not found the most upvoted post yet. Okay, so we scroll down here, and the web surfer should find the most upvoted post. So navigate to r/brutalism and find the most upvoted post. To access the subreddit, I will navigate to the URL, and you can see here that it is the correct URL. I'm not going to click it. And it did that, typed it into the browser address bar, and gives me a screenshot of this. And we can see, discover and appreciate brutalist buildings. Okay, good. So I was correct on that. I'm happy about that. And we can see here, scroll through and identify most upvoted post. And you can see this is really, there's a lot going on here. And this is an example that would probably have just been quicker for me to go do, but that is not the point of demonstrating these agents working together, which is really what I wanted to show here, is how they're sort of springboarding together to accomplish a task. So we're just gonna go down a little. We need to identify, continue scrolling to find it. I scroll down. So perhaps it's not necessarily understanding how it should do, because if it keeps scrolling, it's unlikely to find the most upvoted post. So let's see if it figures that out and, you know, okay, so it seems like this has just kept scrolling through for a random number of pages, perhaps, and it is telling us that the most upvoted post in the Brutalism subreddit so far is the Geisel Library, University of California, San Diego, with 794 upvotes. So that is a decent amount of upvotes, and I'm interested to see now by clicking on the Reddit where that actually stands. So it says, okay, the task is complete, no further action is needed. Request was completed efficiently. Sorry, I'm reading this the wrong way, but request satisfied, I found a random subreddit, no agent selected, and that kind of finishes the agent's loop, if you will. So what I am going to do here is just kind of quickly go to the Brutalism subreddit. And I do want to see, okay, so that is the first thing that we see on the page, and that is hot. So I suppose if I were to go top today, and interesting, let's do this week. Okay, so this week was 1.4K and this was 795. So we can assume from this that based off of my initial request of actually asking this to tell me the most upvoted post on that subreddit, it just went ahead and showed me the most upvoted posts that it found by going to the main page of the subreddit. It didn't sort or do anything like that. So that's really kind of an interesting example. Now I'm going to do one more that I'm not going to run through a ton like this because it would pretty much take too long, but I want to try to get some of the other agents in on this. So I'll ask something a little more complicated perhaps. Whoops. Okay, so you can see here that I forgot to run the example again. So now I can just probably copy paste this so I don't have to type it again. And once I do that, we don't actually have to do anything because that also, okay. So I'm kind of just gonna let this ride here and I'll maybe briefly touch upon some of the things I see and we'll get going. Now I do want to see kind of the plan. Okay, so the team, obviously we have the team. So facts to look up. Here's the plan to follow as best as possible. So the plan for this specific request is the web surfer is going to find the stock. The coder is going to write a Python script that takes the historical performance and plots it over time, okay, using a suitable library such as matplotlib or plotly. The executor is going to run the Python script to generate the visual plot of the stock's performance, and the file surfer will check and review the generated plot to ensure it accurately represents it. Provide it to the user for visualization. So hopefully this kind of ends up with us having a file that we can click on to see this for ourselves. I'm unable to transcribe all text in the image, but I can summarize or help describe visible content if needed. Okay. Okay, progress is being made as we have identified NVIDIA as a potential top performing stock, which would likely be correct for this case. Okay, so it is searching for the historical stock data on Yahoo Finance, and it asked it to find that data from a reliable financial platform. So for that, it chose Yahoo Finance, which I do believe is reliable enough for our purposes. So we're just going to scroll down here and it's kind of just doing its thing. The orchestrator has thought, and I want to see, okay, so now the orchestrator down here is directing the coder. Please write a Python script that fetches NVIDIA's historical stock performance data from Yahoo Finance and plots it using a library like, okay. Here's a Python script that uses Y-Finance. So instead of actually pulling it from the web surfer to find that information, it is actually using a Python library to get that done, which is intelligent, but interesting because in my initial prompting of this, I had kind of expected that it would basically give it a list of that data from the picture it took of the screenshot from the web surfer. So you can see here it is doing its own more efficient thing. We can see here. Execute it to fetch the historical stock data. Okay, it is asking me if I want to proceed. I wonder if this is because it is going to actually execute code. Now this isn't Docker, so what? The code block was not confirmed by the user and so was not run. Well, I did confirm it. Maybe I should have pressed Y. Okay, the script ran and exited with execute 1. So we had a traceback, so no module named Y-Finance. So based on that, it should hopefully figure out that it did not install that onto the system that it is using here. And please install the Y-Finance module using the command pip install Y-Finance and then execute the script again. Now it seems, I don't know, I wonder if it did. Nope, it still has not. So let's see, because the orchestrator is understanding what to do. It just seems like the executor is not doing it yet. So now it's asking the coder, please provide the correct command to install the Y-Finance package. Where before we can see that it specifically asks the executor to install the Y-Finance module, but now it's asking the coder. Use the following command, okay? This is very interesting. So it essentially asked one agent, it didn't work, so then it went ahead and asked a different agent. Stalled replanning. So now it's, and you can see this is perhaps very convoluted in terms of the actual process that is going on here, but this is, I would say, rather early in kind of experiencing this. I mean, my closest experience with this would be the Anthropic computer use demo that I tried a couple of weeks ago, and that was cool, but also I found some issues with the rate limiting and inefficiency in actually being able to try this many things with it. So we'll see here, right, what's going on. Okay, so the script will display a graph showing the closing. So it seems like it actually has worked. So now the next thing I need to do is actually figure out where that script was saved, and I need to run it. So that's what I will do now. Okay, so I have now found the location of our script, which is not named NVIDIA stock analysis.py, but it was named one of the things that we saw earlier here. So we can see here that if we go into the My Logs folder from within the directory path that we're in here, we can see that there is a Python script. So if I go ahead, I will open this with VS Code. And being that this was all done within Docker here, so everything that we saw on the screen actually functioning, I just went ahead and installed these packages that were necessary to run this in a Conda environment that I had so that I can actually go ahead and reproduce the results. So if I go ahead and run this, we will see on our screen a plot, which is exactly what we asked for. And we see the closing price of NVIDIA stock from the last, I think I asked it 5 years or something like that. Now, I apologize for the slight reduction in microphone quality, but we are going to do a quick installation guide for this. I noticed there were some common issues that I was encountering as well. Well, when I say common, I mean I encountered it and this gentleman encountered the issue as well. So when we go here in the readme.md for the Magentic-One, we can scroll down into the setup and usage portion. Now, when I went ahead and simply followed this, whenever I actually tried running any of these example scripts, I encountered the same error where the module named AutoGen Core was not found. So the way I remedied this is by using the install guide for the AutoGen Core as talked about here. So we're going to begin by following these instructions instead. So we're cloning the AutoGen repository, and then we're going to change directories into there. And once we've done that, we are actually going to need to install UV if it's not installed. And to do that, you would type pip install UV, which I have already done on this system, so you can see the requirement has been satisfied. Following that, we're going to type UV sync all extras with the correct amount of dashes and things like that. And what that is going to do is install the packages in a virtual environment that we can then activate and use. So once that has been completed, we can activate our virtual environment by typing this command. And sorry, I'll make this a little bigger. In doing that, you can see that we are in the virtual environment, and we can ignore the space right here because this is a Conda thing which I'm not using. I tried this with Conda and it did not work. So now that we've gone ahead and kind of done this stuff this way, what we're going to do is just change our directory into the packages autogen Magentic-One. So since we're already in the Python directory, we only need to go a few levels deeper, or a couple levels deeper. Now, following this, we need to configure our environment variables for the chat completion client. So if we just kind of scroll down here and do that, essentially what that means is, because the sort of base configuration for this needs the OpenAI API and the specific GPT model, we're actually going to need to go ahead and set these as environment variables so that when we run these demonstration scripts, they are actually able to access the API using our API key. Now quickly, before we go ahead and do that, next thing we need to do is install Playwright or Chromium, which I just believe is kind of how the web surfer agent will interact with the web. So we'll do that and allow that to finish. So now that this is done, we do actually need to have Docker installed on our machine as well. I am not going to specifically go over how to install that, as there is a bunch of relevant information on how to do that. However, if you want to make sure that Docker is running, you can type start Docker, and that will have started the Docker thing. And if you want to check if it is running, you can think status Docker. Not very versed with Docker. Okay, yes. So we can see that we do have Docker running, and it has been running since 7:35, which was probably when I had initially booted this machine. So, all right. Now that that is all done and we have installed Playwright, our next thing to do is going to be to configure our environment variables. Now, I don't want to share my API key, but I do want to show you just kind of what this is going to look like. So I will go ahead and just do that now. Okay, so to configure our environment with the proper parameters, we're basically going to just type something like this into the terminal. So provider is OpenAI, and here is our arguments for the keys. So for key, it will obviously not be my API key. This will be your own personal OpenAI API key, which, take note, is a separate thing from just simply having a ChatGPT subscription. And the second thing is the model, which is whatever specific model is relevant at the time. So now I'm going to go ahead and just paste my key back in there. I'm going to copy this, close the document, paste this into the terminal, enter, and then we'll clear so we can't see it and I can continue. And then now that that is done, our next step is going to be to play with this. And just as you saw in the examples, all I'm going to do for now is just simply run Python examples, example.py, with the logs argument, which is required, as we see here. It is the directory for logs. There is an HIL mode, which is enable human in the loop mode, which I do believe is referenced somewhere up here, but I think that just kind of allows you to moderate specific decisions it makes and oversee so it does not end up doing things that put you or your system at risk. And then finally, we have save screenshots of browser, which I do believe is as simple as the screenshots that we saw being referenced in the examples will actually be saved into the logs directory. So that is pretty much how I went about installing this. Now, I understand this may not be super useful for many people who want to use this outside of those of us with an OpenAI API key or account. Just to briefly show how much that costs. So I played with this probably about twice as much as what you saw in my video, and the API cost for everything here was 70 cents. So it is rather expensive, and that is definitely why I am going to be looking to get this running with a local model. So that was just a quick overview of Magentic-One. I think it's very cool and promising. Now, for one of my upcoming videos, really what I'm going to try to do is link this to the Llama 3.2 vision model that was just released with Ollama a few days ago or a day or two ago, so that you can actually go ahead and run this entirely locally without actually needing to use an OpenAI API key or anything like that. So that way it would essentially be free sans the cost of electricity and things like that. And I will put up a tutorial for that and how to actually set it up and things once I personally get that working.